This is my fifth podcast, compiled during the COVID-19 pandemic as an idea about some films which might be a watch during the lockdown. I thought I'd have a go at adult comedies, but there are a lot about. I have more than 60 on my website, so I've decided to present them in two sections. This is the classic section, and I present 5 iconic comedies, most of which have cult followings. I'm mindful of the fact that there are a lot of film enthusiasts who were not even born in the 1980s. So if this category applies to you, have a listen. The first film is The Blues Brothers, which was directed by John Landis and released in 1980. Jake and Elwood are blood brothers, played by Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. Elwood picks up Jake from the prison where he has served 3 years of a 5-year sentence, and they go to the orphanage where they were brought up, finding that institution requires $5,000 to pay its taxes. They agree that they will reform their blues band and will put on some concerts to raise the money. So that's it, really. The characters wear black suits, dark glasses and trilby hats, which they never discard. And Elwood drives a former Illinois police car sold to him at an auction with, importantly, an 8-track stereo instead of the police radio. The plot requires that they first of all get the band together and thereafter put on some performances. But as time passes, they find themselves pursued by the police, a country and western band in an RV, a bunch of Nazis, and a mystery woman who attacks them with a variety of weaponry. The results of this plot are a load of set pieces, including performances by a number of idols: Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, James Brown and Cab Calloway, plus a lot of R&B music and some epic car chases. There are some wonderful jokes. I love one which takes place as Elwood drives Jake away from the prison gates. Jake lights a cigarette with the car's lighter and then throws it out of the window. And when they are attempting to recruit a band member who has a job as a head waiter in a posh restaurant, they cause a fuss, including pretending to be Middle Eastern and offering to buy the daughter of the couple at the next table. Over time, this film has become a cult classic. The Valhalla Cinema in Melbourne still shows it every night, and the band performed for years afterwards. I had the privilege of seeing them at a leisure complex in Swindon. They were fantastic. There is a Lego version of the car chase which takes place in a mall. Check it out. So if you are still locked in, watch The Blues Brothers. It will make you feel better. The next film is Trading Places from 1983. This film was also directed by John Landis. The central conceit of the movie is a bet between two brothers, Randolph and Mortimer Duke, who run a commodities trading house, Duke and Duke. The bet is whether one of their privileged traders, Louis Winthorpe III, played by Dan Aykroyd, can survive out on the street when everything is taken away from him, and whether Billy Ray Valentine, played by Eddie Murphy, a savvy treat beggar, can successfully replace him. These two have had a confrontation on the street, resulting in Billy Ray being arrested. The Dukes sack Louis, freeze his bank account and bar him from the company-owned house in which he has been living. The first thing that happens to him is the loss of his girlfriend, the posh and slinky Penelope, the great niece of the Dukes. And he continues to go downhill until rescued from the gutter by a good-hearted prostitute, Ophelia, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. The Dukes get Billy Ray released from prison and install him in Winthorpe's office. He is successful as a commodities trader and establishes a friendly relationship with Winthorpe's butler, Coleman, played by Denholm Elliott. Louis is depressed and attempts to end his life by taking an overdose. while at the same time Billy Ray overhears the Dukes discussing the bet and deciding to sack him but not to take Louis back. He goes to find Winthorpe, who is at death's door, and so he has to be nursed back to health before they can deal with Duke's ambition to clean up on Orange Juice futures, unable to put in a plan to change the result. Honestly, I never quite understood exactly how they did this, and it would be a spoiler to go further. But I finally understood what was going on after listening to Margot Robbie explaining the process from her bathtub in The Big Short. I made this film a must-see on my website, so if you've missed it, give it a go. And now we come to Withnail and I, which was released in 1987. Many comedies rely on an excessive consumption of mind-altering substances in order to generate the laughs, and in this case it is alcohol. The Withnail of the title and I, possibly Marwood, although he is never named in the film, are out-of-work actors living in a grubby flat in London. They are played by Richard E. Grant as Withnail and Paul McCann as I. The two spend most of their time in the pub, getting out of their heads. But money is short, and so they fall back on Uncle Monty, Withnail's relative, played by the wonderful Richard Griffiths, who dispenses booze enthusiastically and lends them the key to his Lake District cottage. Since the sink of the flat is full of dirty dishes and their creditors run out in the pub, they get in their old jag and eventually reach the cottage, which is also in a state, cold and damp and lacking food, fuel and booze. They get to the pub and eventually manage to buy a chicken, alive. Later, Monty arrives and makes sexual advances to Marwood, who manages to fend him off, but he still provides them with money for Wellingtons and takes them to the nearest town in his roller. They spend the money in the pub, and later there is a scene in a tea shop where they drunkenly demand cake. Marwood tells Monty that he is in a closet relationship with Withnail, and so Monty departs for London. Later, Marwood receives a telegram offering him work, and so they also must return to the city. So despite this rather bleak description, this is a fun outing and replaced Flash Gordon as my teenage son's favourite film. They were able to quote much of the dialogue word for word. There is a drinking game associated with the film, the participants having to match Withnail drink for drink. This consists of 9.5 glasses of red wine, half a pint of cider, 1 shot of lighter fluid, 2.5 measures of gin, 6 glasses of sherry, 13 drams of scotch, and half a pint of beer. Surely no one actually manages to complete this in the 2 hours of the film. This movie is often considered to be the best British comedy of all time, so you should see it if you missed it first time around. We move on to The War of the Roses, released in 1989. This movie follows on from Romancing the Stone and The Jewel of the Nile, starring Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner and Danny DeVito, with the latter both participating and directing. Oliver and Barbara Rose met at an auction when they were young, married, had children, and then began to drift apart. Barbara, becoming more interested in home building by buying an old mansion and filling it with upmarket antiques, and Oliver forging a successful career as a lawyer in Washington. Their story is told by Gavin D'Amato to a client as a cautionary tale. So Oliver ceases to pay any attention to Barbara, who gradually becomes to dislike him, and so initiates divorce proceedings. Oliver consults Gavin, and it is found that even though divorce proceedings are in train, he cannot be made to leave the marital home. So they divide the house in two, each with their own half. Of course things do not go smoothly. They argue in company and start to attack each other's parts of the house, literally. Oliver mostly uses the starting handle of his Morgan sports car to smash Barbara's possessions. But when he runs over her cat, it is a move too far, and she in return runs over his car. Then she arranges for a dinner of reconciliation, but serves him with pâté apparently made from his dog. If it is possible, things get worse. At test screenings, the audience were horrified at the possibility that the dog had been turned into pâté, and so it was shown on screen soon afterwards. In the IMDb trivia, the make and models of the truck used to run over the Morgan and the model of the Morgan itself are identified. The description of the truck might be right, but that of the Morgan is wrong. So for Morgan enthusiasts, it is a Morgan Plus 4 two-seater, which would have been from the early 60s if it really had a starting handle. Lastly, we come to Trainspotting from 1996. This film is based on a book by Irving Walsh. The name comes from a scene in the book, not the film, where the guys are shooting up in the derelict Leith railway station, a real location full of giant weeds due to the Victorian glass roof. When asked what they are doing, Renton, the central character, replies that they are train spotting. In the film, Renton, played by Ewan McGregor, and the other dissolute characters, played by Ewan Bremner, Johnny Lee Miller, Kevin McKidd and Robert Carlyle, live in a disgusting squat where there is also a mother with a young baby. Renton is persuaded to try to kick the drug habit, but replaces heroin with opium suppositories. He notices an increase in his libido due to the lesser drug use, and sleeps with a young woman in her parents' flat. Shock horror? She is only 14 and uses the fact to make sure that her relationship with Renton continues. Because of the opium suppositories, Renton ends up in what is described as the worst toilet in Scotland and has to take special steps to recover the suppository. I have chosen not to use any of the photos of this event taking place, nor do I feel able to describe it. You will have to see the film to find out how it goes. In essence, Renton's return to normality is seen as being a bit boring, and for a while he returns to his drug user's ways, but is brought up short when one of his friends dies of HIV caught during injection. Once more, this film does not sound like fun, and it would have been dire but for Danny Boyle's great job of direction, keeping the viewer on the verge of distress and laughter at the same time. Masterly stuff. If you've not seen it, give it a try. So that's it for this week. For us in Spain, the lockdown has eased a bit. People are allowed out to go out jogging at some time of the day, and there are designated times for children and the aged to be able to go out for walks. So things seem to be getting a bit better. I'm not quite sure whether I believe the statistics, but you can't hide the fact that the emergency hospital at the Madrid Conference Centre has closed, although the celebration of the closure could have caused a lot more new infections to take place. But either way, most of us are still mainly stuck at home, so give these wonderful comedies a chance to give you a laugh. And keep safe, guys.